Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Geek Warning from the Escape Collective. I'm James Huang, and I'm joined today by tech editor Dave Roman, Sydney in Australia. Hi, Dave.
Hello.
We also have fellow tech ace, Ronan McLaughlin. Hi, Ronan.
Hello.
We're supposed to have our own in-house hammer joining us today. Escape Collective Big G's Kaylee Fretz. Kaylee is MIA. I don't know where he is right now. He has recorded I think 3 other podcast episodes today, however, so he may be podcasted out. So maybe he'll be joining us. Maybe he won't. We'll see. Anyway, Ronan, you went on a little bike ride this weekend, huh?
Yeah, we talked about it on the placeholder podcast today also, so I kind of feel like I'm repeating myself a bit. I'm blowing my own trumpet, which I do not enjoy doing, but yeah, I cycled the length of Ireland in what should be ratified pretty soon as a new record time. 568 kilometers in 15 hours and 30 minutes. Well, 15 hours and 6 if you don't include the stops. And I hadn't planned to stop, but yeah, the conditions got the better of me.
Had you thought about going the short way?
I thought about the route a lot. There's an article up on the website now, detailing all the sort of optimizing that I tried to do for this ride, and the route is the first segment of that article, and it's quite lengthy. All the detail that I went into in trying to optimize the route. So yeah, that was the shortest and the flattest I could come up with.
What is the sock of choice for 15 hours in a time trial position?
The sock of choice?
Yeah.
I was a little bit so I as part of this sort of record attempt, I've wanted to break the record for a long time, but when I decided I was going to do it, well, I'll let you on a little sort of loophole that I found in the regulations here. Not
you
really
didn't wear socks.
I am really getting down a rabbit hole here at the moment. I'm getting sidetracked pretty bad, but I'll get to your sock question in a second. Basically, the rules say that you have to nominate your date 3 weeks in advance. And your exact starting time. So basically you can't just wait for a tailwind. But while it does say you can only nominate 2 routes per notification, and you email in notifications, and I think that's to allow you to select either south to north or north to south on this one day. It doesn't say how many notifications you could give. So I basically periodically throughout the year, once a month, kind of basically sent Cycling Ireland to officiate these attempts a notification for every Saturday and Sunday of the following month, and pretty much every time and every direction. And that was a bit laborious, but it meant that I still kind of had the pick of the weather. But what I wanted to do when I decided I was going to do it last weekend was sort of raise some awareness around food allergies, because my daughter has a severe nut allergy. And a raw egg allergy also. And as part of that, I sort of adopted an American foundation called Red Sneakers for Oakley. Oakley was a young kid who tragically lost his life after suffering an allergic reaction. And Oakley, he loved red sneakers apparently, and in his honor and sort of to raise awareness around food allergies, they set up International Red Sneakers Day, which I missed a few weeks back, but I decided, well, I would have my own International Red Sneakers Day and wear red shoes for this attempt at the weekend. And hopefully anybody who hears this message and never sees a photo of me in that ride will piece the red shoes together with that awareness campaign. So that meant that I couldn't wear overshoes, obviously, and so I had to wear aero socks. Back to your sock question. And then when I got down there on Saturday night, got up on Sunday morning, 4 a.m., it was absolutely pouring down with rain. I thought, well, I'll wear these black Castelli aero socks that I have. And when I put them on, I realized they must be made for Remco Evenepoel because they are very, very short. And I wanted to maximize the sock height to try and grab back some of those aero gains. And so instead, I decided to wear, you remember those €1,000 socks that Annemiek van Vleuten wore in the World Championships last year?
How can we forget them?
Yeah, how can we forget them? Well, I was lucky enough to get a pair of those socks. I did not pay €1,000, but I also didn't go to the wind tunnel and didn't get them custom made. So I think basically I just got the €40 socks that they sell that are pretty much identical. But somebody tumble dried them the very first time I wore them in the Ross, and melted, not me, somebody else, whoever washed our kit that night, melted all of the sort of gripper on the inside of them. It wasn't even Johnny. I can't blame Johnny for this one.
All right.
So they were sort of already destroyed. So I thought, well, they are white. They're going to get destroyed in the rain. They're already destroyed. I'll wear those. And can't believe how long it took me to answer that question.
I can't believe that a simple question about socks managed you to also answer my next question, which is what the cause was. So anyway, we've done that, so we can move on.
Good stuff. Thank you.
Ronan, I'm very curious. So I don't know if you remember that superhero character, the Flash, but in the old comics, if I remember correctly, it was like his boots or something had like little wings on the back of them.
Okay.
Has anyone ever tried a little extension like that in the wind tunnel for a cycling sock to see if that would work? I know, I'm sure it wouldn't be UCI legal, but it might look cool.
Pretty sure. Like, if you think of skier, world record speed ski downhill snow thing attempts, they've sort of got the same profile going on there, haven't they? And yeah, surely it would be a more aerodynamic solution. Definitely not UCI legal. I don't know of anybody who's tried it in socks. I would love to see it. But there are those new triathlon shoes. Like, I think I sent you a link to them about 2 years ago, James, and they were only in development. And they've recently been released. Velo Vita, I think they're called. And they have the retention buckle at the back, and it's designed as such that it is sort of almost like a fairing shape profile of the heel of the shoe. So maybe a similar idea there. And there's other shoes that put like a bow tie at the back of the heel and maybe has similar effect. But I want this, what you're talking about.
But they're not shaped like wings.
They're not Flash. Is it Flash or Flash Gordon?
The Flash.
The Flash. Okay. Can't say I know him.
All right. Well, if anyone has some spare time in a wind tunnel and is handy with stitching, fashion up some socks for me and let me know, because I'm curious.
I wonder if it's like a trademark thing of DC Comics as well. So maybe that's why no brands are doing Flash-based socks.
I'm going to the wind tunnel next week, and I'm willing to infringe some patents to try this out.
Anyway.
Okay. Well, Dave, now that you're very much back and settled in from the Handmade Bicycle Show Australia, I'm going to return to my usual question for you. What's your latest tool purchase?
You know, I've been so distracted with taking photos and editing photos of really nice custom bikes that I actually haven't bought a tool in over a week.
What? In over a week? That's got to be some sort of record.
Over a week, yes.
Are you sure it's just the distraction? There could be something more serious going on here.
To be honest, I've looked. I just haven't found any that really sparked the level of interest that they needed to. So, yeah.
James, I think Dave has he owns all tools.
No, that's not the case.
I don't think that's possible.
Yeah, no. I mean, the last one I bought is a Kickstarter. I'm waiting on it, but it's I'm not going to mention it because when I mention tools, there's a small number of people that just get curious and want to also figure out why I bought the tool, so they order one. And I'd rather not mention it because I actually genuinely don't think it'll be any good. It just looks like a fun fidget toy. And I don't want anyone to buy it off of what they might think is my recommendation when it absolutely isn't. So, but yeah, it's something on Kickstarter and it's something from the UK and it looks like a fidget toy. So maybe some people can figure out what that is.
Okay, then. In a future episode, we'll talk about Dave's lack of fiscal responsibility. All right. Well, anyway, we've got a long list of topics for today's show as usual, including SRAM's new Apex electronic and mechanical 1x12 group sets. We'll talk about some of the tech we saw at the most recent Mountain Bike World Cup in Lenzerheide, Switzerland. Commencal now in the gravel bike market. We'll dive into some of the gear decisions Ronan made for his little ride down the street this past weekend, aside from socks. We'll also share some thoughts on the emergence of SRAM's universal derailleur hanger system on drop bar bikes. But before we get too involved with the news, we first want to thank our sponsors for this week's episode, and that would be our Escape Collective members. Because you see, we intentionally do not run any ads on Geek Warning, and so we rely on the contributions of our members to keep this show afloat. Monthly memberships start at just $11.99, or you can save a bit on an annual plan instead. Either way, you get full access to all the content on the site, full commenting capability, opportunities to join in on our occasional live Geek Warning episodes. Speaking of which, we got to schedule one of those sometime soon. And you also get an invitation to our members-only Discord community. But we especially want to give a super, super warm thank you to a few of our lifetime members who each ponied up a pretty big pile of money to help us get Escape Collective off the ground. So shout out today goes to, first of all, 3D printing master Chris Hirschap, legendary Shane Miller of GP Llama, Washington, D.C. based bike mechanic Gregory Thomas of Precision Bicycle Services, and then a former coworker of mine and a wheel builder extraordinaire, Zach Masick of Z-Spokes in Charlotte, Vermont. And last but not least for today, the folks at Prototypo Works in Melbourne, Australia, makers of the most absolutely insanely over-engineered water bottle cage bolts, valve caps, valve adapters, and threaded plugs that the world has ever seen. Seriously, they're insane. Anyway, thank you so, so much to our lifetime backers for making this whole thing happen.
Thank you.
I literally just finished up watching a GP Llama video on the new Zwift Play buttons things. He has his hands on them, and I find them quite interesting. So,
a set of those are apparently on their way to you now, Ronan. So we should hopefully have some firsthand accounts on that, firsthand account of that of our own pretty soon. They do look interesting. I'm a little disappointed. There's probably some trademark or patent sort of thing issue here. I kind of wish it was shaped more, or like the button layout was more like a Nintendo controller.
You always have to go back to the gaming consoles.
Hey,
every time we talk about Zwift.
Zwift is the one who came up with the whole concept of this, like the gamification of bike riding. Like they were the ones who said it themselves. So
I think this does get us a step closer, though.
Maybe.
I've been Googling for cheat codes already based on the controllers. Just I'd be keen to just not have to pedal.
The code is body weight divided by 2. I think that's the cheat code. Height multiplied by 0.75.
Yeah, right.
All right. Well, all we need is the button code for that now, right? All right. Anyway, let's get into the news here. So first up, SRAM has just announced a complete revamp of its entry-level Apex group set, which SRAM says is now focused on gravel riders instead of road riders like Apex has always been in the past. It moves from an 11-speed format to a 12-speed cassette. There are both Axis wireless electronic and updated mechanical versions. No front derailleurs, no cable actuated brakes, and all things considered, it's actually pretty impressively affordable. You can get the full details on my article on escapecollective.com right now, but the TLDR version is the stuff actually seems to work quite well. I don't know. What do you guys think of this? This was not something I think we all expected that Apex would get a wireless version at some point. I am a little bit surprised, pleasantly surprised, I should say, that there's also a 12-speed mechanical one too, though.
Yeah, I think it's arguably about time. As far as if you look at the mountain bike side of things with Eagle, how much they've trickled down Eagle over the last few years down to quite entry-level price points, while the gravel segments kind of remained. I'm going to say they almost ignored it of how old, Rival 1 and Apex 1 are now, that we're still being specced on bikes, but that 1x11 speed with like an 11 to 42 tooth cassette, that just felt like a very old group set at this point. So yeah, I think it's a welcomed addition to the lineup. I think it was a little overdue, and I think it's a little bit confusing as well in terms of the number of options across the Axis and the mechanical, which I think we can get to. Yeah. But
there are a lot of options, so I should give our listeners a quick rundown. So you do have Apex Axis wireless electronic, and then you have Apex mechanical, and then within each of those, as I mentioned, it's one by only, but then also 12-speed cassettes. You can go with either the Explore option, that's what SRAM calls their kind of more gravel-minded gearing, and for Apex, that'll be an 1144 cassette, Or you can go super wide range and go with an eagle setup, or what's commonly referred to as a mullet, because it's a mountain bike cassette. And then for the Apex range, that is designed to be, I believe it's either an 1150 or an 1152 at the back. And then there's a separate derailleur to go with that. So you can kind of mix and match. You can go with like an Axis Explorer, or you can go with a mechanical eagle, or vice versa. But because there's also quite a lot of compatibility baked into the system, as usual with SRAM's Axis stuff, you can mix and match pretty much nearly any Axis component at this point now. And then with the mechanical stuff, because all the 12-speed cassette spacing is the same, you can put on one of the nicer cassettes too from another group set if you want, as long as you get the right derailleur matched up to it.
Yeah, and for me, that's sort of where the confusing part comes in, is that there's a lot of compatibility when we're talking about Axis protocols or the shifter cable pull used in the mechanical, but the Eagle and the Explorer, the derailleurs are not cross-compatible, and they're still using an entirely different chain system. So Explorer is using SRAM's flat top chain.
Flat top.
With,
correct.
Suitable cassette and suitable pulley wheels on the derailleur. And then the Eagle version is using the original Eagle chain, so a much more regular-looking 12-speed chain, which again is not really cross-compatible with the Explore cassettes and all that. So there's kind of like you kind of pick one and you almost have to stick with it. It's not like you can jump back and forth so easily between, say, an Eagle cassette and Explore cassette just with swapping wheels. That's not really on the table here.
Right. So essentially what SRAM will say you have to do is you have to match the chain cassette and rear derailleur. There is some wiggle room around some of that if you're creative, but however, I would say for most Apex buyers, essentially what you're going to do is always match your chain cassette and rear derailleur. So as long as you do that, you're good to go. With that new 12-speed mechanical shifter, what's interesting there is that SRAM is they've switched from their traditional road cable pull ratio to the Eagle cable pull ratio, which so it's exactly the same as what they use on their 12-speed mountain bike stuff. So yeah, you can now use those levers with a regular SRAM Eagle mountain bike rear derailleur. You won't have a barrel adjuster built into that one, but you could always just add an inline one and you'll be good to go. But either way, the big thing for me is that the cassette spacing is the same. So there is, to me, the important part is there is mix and match compatibility where it counts.
Sure. Yeah.
But yeah, I'm pretty excited about this because again, like the pricing is pretty good. I would say it definitely brings wireless electronic to a new category of riders. I think SRAM is anticipating that. They're pretty upfront. They're in saying that Apex is going to be predominantly an OEM group set. Like it's not really going to be expected that many people are going to be buying this stuff aftermarket. And the wireless stuff they're saying is going to be probably on bikes that are costing about $2,500 to $4,000 US. And then the mechanical stuff will probably show up on bikes as low as about $2,000 US. So pretty interesting. I mean, I've got a couple of short rides on the stuff, and yeah, it works quite well.
I think the big thing that jumped out at me and I've only briefly read through your draft article at the moment, James, but the big thing that jumped out to me was, first of all, the compatibility that you mentioned there, but more so like when we knew when we sort of thought there was an Axis group set coming here, that I know it was probably always likely it was going to be entirely compatible with other Axis, but I just wondered at this price point, was there a risk there was going to be some way of making it non-compatible with the likes of the new wireless blips and that sort of thing? And it's just so good to see that actually it is there's that compatibility also. And then for me, it just looks so good in terms of it's clearly recognizable as being from the same family as Rival and the New Force in terms of the levers, which I think was a good thing. And then finally, what did you say the weight gain was compared to Rival? It's like 100 grams or something for a comparable group set.
Yeah, I mean, Rival is already pretty heavy.
Yeah.
So it is nice that it's kind of only 100 grams heavier. But what's interesting is that certainly, you can never completely walk away from your old weight weaning self, right? So, it's hard for me to ignore how much the lower end SRAM Axis road groups way. But I actually posed the question of weight versus electronic shifting on our Discord channel to our members. And I have to say that the responses I got from people were pretty overwhelmingly one-sided. Most of them responded that either they were aware that the stuff was heavier and they didn't care, or they just didn't care at all. They don't even know what the stuff weighs, and they just wanted electronic shifting. So, SRAM has clearly bet in that direction, and it seems like they've bet correctly.
Yeah. The thing that stood out to me is that, Ronan, you said like it looks like Rival, it looks like it belongs, and what stood out to me is that it actually basically is Rival, right? Like it's like the lever is effectively a rival body with the Rival internals, and like the shift mechanism and the shift function is basically the same as everything else in the lineup. All that really changes, as far as I'm aware, is the lever blade, right? Like it's a cheaper lever blade.
So I asked SRAM about this. So essentially, the reasons why Apex is about 100 grams heavier or so. Rival has an aluminum lever blade, but in that one it's forged, I believe, and then in Apex it's a stamped piece, and then likewise, like the parallelogram links on the Rival rear derailleurs are also those are also forged aluminum, and then on Apex they are stamped. It's just mainly stuff like that. Essentially they said that the differences boil down to materials and finishes.
Yeah.
But functionally,
the moving components.
Are
the same.
And then like stuff like I think they put bushings in the pulley wheels instead of bearings, stuff like that. But this is one of the things that we've always said was going to be occurring with electronic in general, is sort of just the democratization of that shift performance, because SRAM is very open about the fact that they are using the exact same electronic components across all of the Axis drop bar stuff. So the shift performance, as far as I'm concerned, and from what I can tell just from brief rides on it, it is identical to the nicer stuff. It's just heavier.
Yeah.
And just going back to the lever look for a second, I think I was more thinking of the mechanical shifters, and that if you think of the current Apex mechanical shifters, to me they've always looked like they were like an accident or something. They didn't really look like they were like the hood and the lever didn't really seem to fit together all that well. Whereas these new ones kind of look like Rival Axis shifters, which I think is a good thing at this price point.
Yeah, they basically are. The texture on the hood is unique to Apex, but from what I understand, the hoods themselves, like the lever shape and everything, it is identical. So those hoods are cross-compatible and stuff like that. But yeah, it looks good. I think I legitimately think SRAM did a very nice job with this stuff. I mean, I just got my Apex Axis long-term sample, so we'll see how the stuff holds up over the long run. But overall, my first impressions are really positive.
Perhaps my favorite part is the new mechanical hydro lever, which they
looks
said
awesome.
Yeah, they said was an engineering heavy lift, which aligns with what I'd heard with Shimano before, which is their mechanical hydraulic disc brake levers are some of the most, or are the most complicated component they've ever made. And SRAM sort of backed that up here with this product. But yeah, what I like most is that they've completely redesigned the brake internals compared to their previous mechanical hydraulic, and those internals now align with the Axis levers. So it's kind of the same master cylinder layout that they've got in the Axis levers, which is a really welcome change compared to the wood style screws and banjo fittings that hid underneath the covers of the previous mechanical hydro levers.
Yeah, big improvement for sure. And the 12-speed mechanical stuff, unfortunately, won't be available until about September or so. But I'm actually more eager to try that stuff out than the Axis stuff. I mean, again, the Axis stuff, as I mentioned before, it seems to be what people are generally more excited about as far as kind of just shifting technology goes in general. But I do think the 12-speed mechanical stuff is such a welcome and long overdue improvement. And for sure, there are going to be a lot of people who are just going to want to stick with mechanical for whatever their reasons are, if they're like, going out into the backcountry, whatever, so on and so forth. But certainly as a long time mechanical fan, and I've always liked SRAM double tap stuff. Quite eager to see how the 12-speed mechanical stuff is over the long haul.
How's the braking on the new calipers?
It's pretty good. The thing with the old Force One, Rival One, that sort of stuff. The hydraulic stuff in there was old, like really old. It dates back to SRAM's more or less original hydraulic design. It's what they called like Hydro R, and it is, gosh, it's got to be 10 plus years old at this point. It has to be. It's quite old.
It was basically the same lever that was used with the hydraulic rim brakes. Yeah,
exactly. So it goes back quite a long way. And the new hydraulic guts are shared with all of the other current generation stuff. So there is less deadband in the levers, for example, and it feels a little bit more responsive. I write this in my article as well. I mean, as much as I am pretty impressed with the brake performance overall in terms of just like power and modulation and stuff like that, to me, they still just don't feel that great. Like the response still feels a little heavy. Like I would prefer like a lighter and snappier brake lever, almost kind of more, dare I say, more like cable actuated rim brake sort of thing, like with that kind of springiness and light feel. And honestly, kind of what Shimano was able to do with their hydraulic stuff. So the action's still a little heavy. It's almost as if the fluid's like a higher viscosity than it should be, even though I know it's not. But that's probably my only criticism of it right now. But otherwise, it works quite well.
Before we move on, what is everyone's thoughts on the fact that SRAM seems to just completely ignore / think that the entry-level road space is effectively dead, as they evidently do by the fact that this is a one-by only wide range sort of gravel gearing only at the entry level, and they don't really seem to have any real interest in a more road-specific version of this.
I know that a lot of people like to stick to ideas that like the bike industry is pushing X and Y on people and that sort of thing. To me, I see this more as SRAM just acknowledging that the entry-level road market just isn't really there. For people looking to get into drop bar riding, I have friends who are longtime mountain bikers, for example, who are maybe getting into gravel riding for the first time, or just kind of getting into drop bar riding for the first time. And I can say that there's zero interest on their end to getting into the road. And these are longtime cyclists otherwise. So if you're looking at people who are just kind of looking to get into drop bar riding in general, I don't see a lot of people getting started or being excited about trying to ride on the road. It just doesn't seem to be there.
Is it that, and kind of, as I'm about to say this, I kind of feel like I sound a bit dated already, but is it that, or is it that gravel bikes, at least where I am here on this part of the corner of the planet, gravel bikes tend to be like an additional bike. They're not the, you have your road bike or whatever bike you ride, then you want to sort of dabble in gravel, and typically speaking, customers are on a smaller budget when they're looking for a gravel bike, and it's usually entry level stuff that is on those bikes. Certainly when I bought my first gravel bike, it was
I think that's definitely an aspect that's true. Especially for the road market that might only want a gravel bike once a month type thing. I think that certainly applies. Or maybe they're buying a gravel bike as a commuter. I do think that's a factor. But I think, like from James's point, the first bike buyer, maybe they're coming from the mountain bike world and want a drop bar bike. That group of customers not starting with a road bike anymore.
I think it's also a product of the industry's own making too. Mm-hmm. This is. I wrote a column on this subject years ago, talking about how different types of cycling are portrayed in various industry marketing. And like on the road, it is just, race, suffer, train, so on and so forth. How hard are you, so on and so forth. the gravel riding marketing it's much more casual. People are portrayed like happy and smiling and having a good time. If you are looking to just kind of get started on riding a drop bar bike, I think it seems pretty obvious which one of those two worlds seems more appealing from a casual user standpoint, right? And it's only very recently, I feel like, that the bike industry is starting to change that tune a little bit. But I mean, that effect has already been cemented pretty hard, I think.
Yeah. I think the other thing here is that just for me, it feels like SRAM's almost willing to let Shimano have whatever is left of this market.
I mean, they could very well be.
Yeah. There's talk of Shimano about to update their entry-level groups to bring it into the Q's range of things. And that would be a very competitive product that would probably be pretty hard to compete against. So, I wouldn't be surprised at all that SRAM's done their research and said, that this entry-level road market is so small now that it's just, they can have it.
Yeah, I mean, I would probably agree with that assessment, and to me, it just seems like a smart business decision, right? Like, if you know that piece of the pie is pretty small, then why try and fight for it? Just go after another piece of the pie, or go after the bigger piece of the pie. We all like pie, more pie for everybody. Speaking of gravel, next bit of news that we're going to move into is a new entry into the gravel bike market from a company that has not bothered to do drop bar bikes before, and that would be Commencal. So Dave, you and I both got this press release, I think like early this morning or last night or something like that. What are we looking at?
The 365, which is, Commencal's first drop bar bike, designed for use every day based on the name. And according to them, it is not like every other gravel bike, which I love because from everything I can see, it's exactly like every other gravel bike.
Pretty close, yeah.
I'd say the big difference here is Commencal have actually, and quite surprisingly, stayed on brand. I mean, they're really known as aluminium specialists, and they really push that. They've ridden where all their competitor brands, they're a very popular brand in the gravity world in downhill racing. They're an incredibly popular and winning brand there. And where pretty much everyone's racing on carbon fiber bikes, they've really stuck to their guns and stayed with aluminium, which all along they've claimed, is a recyclable material and better for the environment, and obviously still good enough to perform. This gravel bike, what surprised me is that you'd expect to find a carbon fork on the front of it like everyone else, and instead they've stuck to aluminium. So, James, what do you think there?
I mean, I have to say, I was reading through the press release and knowing the way Commencal likes to do stuff. Like you said, Dave, I mean, they have kind of really hitched their wagon to this whole aluminum thing. And I was just waiting for them to either just skirt the issue altogether or just like quietly tuck in there. Oh, by the way, there's a carbon fork in there. So yes, I was very surprised to see that there was an aluminum fork on there. I mean, more power to them, because the reason why more companies don't use aluminum forks at this point is because, by my understanding, the issue is that the industry testing for forks is so rigorous right now. It's kind of hard to pass those tests with an aluminum fork now, and it's a little bit easier to get all that stuff done with carbon, considering you can kind of just keep adding more material and still have it be reasonably light. But it's harder to do that with aluminum. So if Commencal is able to do that, then more power to them. I'm curious what it rides like.
Yeah, my initial assumption is that it'll ride stiffer as a result. But yeah, I mean, obviously until we get on the bike, we won't know that. But certainly, as you say, to pass those tests, you need to add probably a lot of material to reinforce that structure. And the easiest way to do that is just to make it stronger and stiffer. So we'll see. But I think, geometry wise, I mean, they're definitely going after, they're like many other mountain bike brands that have introduced a gravel bike in the last 24 months, in that, there's modern mountain bike geometry concepts here, longer reach, shorter stem type thing. And I think they'll find enough success with their current customer base, which I think is the general mission with these brands entering the space. It's just
I think so.
Sell your existing customer one more bike.
Yeah, certainly looking at the promo video, I think they've got a pretty good handle on who their market is. But yeah, like you were saying, geometry-wise, it's about what you'd expect. It's sort of new school, kind of like longer front end, shorter stem, and it's designed kind of more for hooning around as opposed to like going fast on like they're not billing it as a gravel race bike.
Mm-hmm.
No way.
No.
And I can't remember what the pricing is. It's not amazing, but it's not bad.
Mm-hmm.
I think I maybe would have hoped it would be a little bit better since Commencal is a consumer direct brand. But yeah, I'm kind of curious to bring one of these in actually, because I would be, I'm kind of curious to see how much of sort of the mountain bike DNA they've infused into this thing and kind of what the bike is like.
I would love to, and I'm just going to say this so that it then potentially happens that we get peer pressured into doing it. I would love to do a grass oval test. I don't know a cricket ground test. I'm just trying to think of a word that isn't field. And
grass track.
A what?
A grass track?
A grass track test, yes. And of the various new mountain bike brand gravel bikes that have been released, and then compare them against something like a Cervelo Asparo that we all like as the benchmark. I think this could be a very interesting test.
That sounds like a great idea to me. I think what you should do is line up all these bikes.
Yeah.
In sizes that fit both you and me.
Yeah.
And we'll time this to coincide with the Australian spring. Okay. And I will fly down there as winter is about to hit in Colorado.
That sounds very doable. All right. We should start talking.
Yep. Done. We'll make that happen somehow with our magic pile of money. Anyway, so the Commencal does look pretty good. I'm eager to see one in the flesh. But yeah, pretty intriguing. I think it's an interesting bit to talk about, considering that we were just discussing how the entry level seems to be more inclined to kind of more aiming toward gravel instead of road. Like you don't really see a whole lot of mountain bike companies introducing their first road bike, do we?
No, and I don't think we will.
Nope, probably not. Speaking of mountain bikes, though, we just had the second round of the 2023 season of the UCI World Cup round in Lenzerheide, Switzerland, and bunch of good racing going on there. We don't need to talk a whole lot about the racing, however, because I'm kind of curious about more of the tech that we saw there. And one of those things was some new RockShox SID forks that were spotted primarily on the front end of Nino Schurter's bike. Dave, what did we see there?
I was expecting you to throw to Ronan here. Yeah, Flight Attendant. So, I mean, Flight Attendant is SRAM's automatic electronic suspension, which is, I believe, crank-based in terms of... Does it work off power or cadence? I'm not even that...
It doesn't really work on power exactly. There is a crank sensor that's just so to let you know if you're pedaling or not.
Yeah.
But it's really not power based. It's sort of it needs to know if you're pedaling, and then it needs to know if you're going uphill or downhill, and then there are accelerometers, so it knows if there are kind of like bump forces at play, or like say you're in the air, that sort of thing. So there are a bunch of sensors, but it's not really power related.
Gotcha. So yeah, it's they've had this out since early last year. I'd say it got released at the previous Sea Otter, and yeah, it's exactly what you'd expect of an Axis system product, where it has basically the Axis batteries, the same batteries that you'd use on the rear derailleur. They're mounted off both the rear shock and the fork. That rear shock we couldn't see on Nino Schurter's bike because he's on a Scott Spark and it is hidden inside the frame. But we can assume that it was there because his fork had this very obvious battery on the crown of it. And yeah, it seems, it had its first win, basically, its first public appearance and a win from it. And I think it's pretty interesting tech. I think it's about time, maybe. We've been talking about this for a number of years, well before Flight Attendant came to the market in the enduro space. So, yeah, I think it it's certainly a product that makes sense for the discipline of cross-country racing.
Yeah, I mean, if anything, it's a little intriguing that SRAM chose to introduce Flight Attendant on longer travel bikes, which, granted, longer travel bikes arguably need a little more help in terms of making them pedal efficiency.
Yeah. And the weight obsession's less obvious as well.
Yeah. But however, it also seemed like that sort of thing made more sense or would have more appeal to the cross-country market because they are the ones who are kind of more fixated on having suspension only when they want it and not when they don't. So the fact that we're now seeing this on shorter travel cross-country bikes is intriguing because it just seemed like that was almost more of a natural fit, but maybe they were just sort of testing it out in sort of the longer travel disciplines to make sure it worked well. But I mean, SRAM has not made any official announcements as far as cross-country Flight Attendant goes. I even asked my PR contact there, and I got a very, very kind of succinct no comment reply. But it's very clearly done. Yes. Or at least very close to being done. And I would have to imagine that we're going to see an official announcement for this very soon.
Yeah. Also related to that fork, I mean, we've seen this since Cape Epic, but the forks that they've been running are not the same forks that are currently on the market. The most obvious detail is a more heavily machined crown, which tells us that it's a new model. And based on the fork on the Specialized Epic World Cups, which SRAM have gone very quiet on when I asked them about this, but it's that fork on that production bike that is currently on the market matches the fork that's being raced in the World Cups. So it too has the machine crown, and that fork is 110 mil with a 32 mil stanchions, which is not a product that SRAM currently has on their website. So I think it's perhaps I'm riding the new product that we don't know anything about yet.
I dare say that's probably very likely.
Yeah. Anyway. So yeah, I think that's interesting because there were definitely rumors that SRAM would walk away from 32 mil stanchions and that it would all be about the larger 35 mil stanchions moving forward. And that seemed to make sense as travel was going up. 100 mil travel fork there's probably not a very long future for that length of suspension fork. But yeah, it's interesting to see that they seem to be offering the 32 mil still and perhaps in longer travel than before, which is nice for the weight weenies.
Yeah, I actually posed this question to Fox not too long ago because when we were watching the racing in Novo Mesto in the Czech Republic, I was noticing that most of the men's elite field were running, like for the Fox sponsored athletes anyway, they were running the 34, the slightly bigger and slightly heavier model that they have. But there were some men on the 32, and seemingly most of the women's field were on the smaller and lighter 32. So I think Fox has shown that there is still a market for a 32 mil stanchion cross-country fork, particularly if you can make it lighter. And I would have to imagine that RockShox wants a piece of that market for themselves if they can. So not entirely surprising. I will be very, very surprised if someone reverts back to a 28 mil stanchion someday, like back in the early Judy and Sid days and stuff like that. That seems very unlikely because those forks were noodles.
How compliant?
Yes, indeed. How compliant. But another interesting thing that we saw from the World Cup was it's pretty dramatic, actually. At the start of the U23 men's race, there was a Swedish rider, Jakob Söderqvist. My apologies if I'm butchering your name. He was riding on an Arc 8 Evolve FS. It's a kind of lesser known Taiwanese-based brand. And at the start, the underside of his bottom bracket shell basically just sort of completely blew out, which left him and his crankset laying on the ground. And bottom half of his bottom bracket shell was basically nowhere to be seen. Have we ever seen anything like this before? Like, that was bizarre.
It's the most dramatic frame failure I've seen of memory, other than the downhillers hitting into a tree at 40k an hour and the front end snapping off. But this wasn't that, and yeah, the whole bottom bracket shell just falling out of the bike is nothing but funny to me. it's obviously very dangerous and worrying, but
yeah,
but also just such a dramatic failure that you kind of can't help but laugh.
It was pretty insane. I certainly have never seen anything like that before. Arc 8, again, it's a lesser known brand, but they are not necessarily new to the scene. They've been around for a few years now. The person behind it has done a bunch of design work and engineering work for other brands in the background. So I don't know if this was like, clearly there was something wrong, but I don't know if it was a design issue or a manufacturing issue or whatever. But holy crap, that bike did not fare well under the initial start pedal.
Yeah, I mean,
power.
As you just said, we don't know what the cause was, but I really wouldn't be surprised if this bike had seen some previous trauma in that area, like a substantial hit to the crankset or something like that had cracked it, and that this rider just kept riding it, ignoring all the noise. Because that's a very heavily reinforced area of the bike. Like there's normally a lot of material there. So for it to just kind of like fall off dramatically kind of makes me think that it had been failing for a while.
When I seen it, it sort of had me thinking, and granted, I'm not all that au fait with off-road mountain biking and all that sector, so forgive me if this is a bit of a silly question, but
on-road mountain biking you're into, right?
yeah, on-road mountain biking.
Okay, good.
The more I try not to sound silly, the more I sound silly. Anyway. Basically the point I was going to get to is like there's no like UCI frame approval, and I also am aware that frame approval from the UCI doesn't necessarily mean that it's all that safe. It just means that it complies with their regulations in terms of frame dimensions and angles and that. But there is nothing like that off-road, is there?
No, not that I'm aware of. If I'm sure the UCI would love to regulate mountain bikes in the same way that it regulates the road bikes, but at this point, like I don't even know how they would bother to do that. Like, there's just no way they could, like that. All of those horses have left the stable a long time ago. The stable has burned down. Like, they are not getting those horses back in the stable. But yeah, as you said, Ronan, I don't know if that would have even. I don't know if a UCI certification would have even had an effect on this sort of thing. Like, it just clearly seems like
if the stick was in the right place, it might have held the bottom bracket
together. Yeah. So it's either what Dave was saying, that maybe something had happened to this frame already, or possibly some manufacturing defect or some design issue. We really just don't know. We have no idea.
So it's not that I think that the UCI could have prevented this from happening. It more just struck me that such a process, that's what I'm dealing with day in, day out on the roadside over here, and constantly looking at which frames have approval and which frames are prototype status and what the differences are between those being approved and being a prototype and that. And really it means very little, but it just struck me when I seen that, well, actually there's nothing on the mountain bike side.
I like it.
Not saying there should be UCI. I hope you're not listening.
I was going to say, hopefully it stays that way.
Maybe we should cut that whole section out in case we get many ideas.
Oh, it's fine. They don't listen to this podcast anyway, I think. Maybe. But Ronan, I know you're not terribly comfortable talking about mountain bike stuff, but I know that one thing you are comfortable talking about is nitty-gritty optimization stuff, which I know you did an awful lot of for this time trial attempt this successful time trial attempt, I should say, that you did this past weekend. How on earth did you figure out what you were going to be using for this north to south? Was it north to south or south to north? North to south, I think. Oh, south to north. Okay. How did you figure out this end-to-end Irish time trial thing?
Yeah, and why did you decide to do the uphill direction?
Good question. I'm not that good going downhill. I should say, the more I listen to you guys talking about mountain bike tech, the more flight attendant. Like the first thing that comes into my mind when you guys say those words is, which one of my bikes would I have to sell to get one of these things? And then when I realize all of my bikes is the answer, I usually pass on it. But maybe one day. But yeah, going back to what I am more comfortable talking about. How did I decide? The route, for anybody who's been on escapecollective.com today, they may have seen a masked indoor rider on the homepage there, wearing a paint suit and VR goggles. And basically, yeah, the single part of this route that I had a big question mark over was on the other side of the island, a 7-hour drive away. So it wasn't really all that feasible to go down and check it out myself. So I heard about Verzoom and VZ Fit, which is a Meta Oculus headset based fitness app. It's kind of like a fun at home fitness app that you can sort of, do all different types of exercises. One of the things you can do is you can connect it to a smart trainer, and you can use Google Maps to upload routes to Google Maps and then download a KML file and upload that KML file to VZ Fit, and then VZ Fit will take a Google Street View of every section of that route basically and transform that into a route that you can then ride with interactive, gradient simulation and all that based on GPS data. And you can, it meant that I could ride a route 500 kilometers away from the relative discomfort of my own garage.
This sounds like something that is a few years ahead of what pro teams are probably going to start doing for course.
I mean, I mentioned that in the article, like how long before we see teams using that, and the answer sort of is that it's already been done, in that we tried to use this for reconning the final 3 kilometers of each stage of the Ross, which Escape covered recently. It's a little bit impractical at the moment in that you either need someone on a trainer pedaling away to make your VZ Fit avatar move along the course and you can see the street view version of the route, or you have to sit there and use the hand remotes to wave your hands back and forth to power this like buggy thing that you can also do the courses on. So I had thought about, was there some way you could hook up a speed sensor to a cordless screwdriver or something like that, but I never actually tried it out, but I'm sure you could hack it some way. But I mean, it actually, like within half an hour of getting on riding this thing, I already had made a decision about which of the 2 routes I had in mind would I take. So it's actually, I don't think it's, you're not going to be doing massively intense workouts or interval sessions with an Oculus headset on yet. I don't think. I think that's pretty certainly going to damage it if you're sweating enough. But for a change of scenery, like switching out Zwift for Google Street View, it's quite nice for a short endurance or recovery ride, and it's actually pretty. I enjoyed it. Did it a couple of times.
Moving away from that a little bit, but how do you go sitting in a time trial position for 15 or so hours? Like, how many times did you adjust said position during the 15 hours?
During the said 15 hours, I only once adjusted my cleat. That was
I would have put money on it being the cleat.
I only decided to change to those shoes 3 or 4 days before I did the ride. So that's my excuse this time.
Okay. What speed were you going when you did that?
I mean, by the time it was finished, I'd slowed right down, but starting, I was trying to hold as much speed as I could to get it done without losing speed.
For the benefit of our listeners here who can't see Ronan on our screens here, I should just point out that Ronan is actually in a time trial position right now. That's how his desk is configured. So he's just like that all the time.
Well, I am since Sunday. Can't stand it.
Yeah. Most people have monitor raise, like blocks that raise their monitors up. Ronan actually has one that drops it. A negative rise monitor stand.
Right, yeah, because his desk, the level of his desk is actually lower than the seat of his chair.
Yeah. But crucially, the keyboard is not more than 830 millimeters in front of the bottom bracket for the swivel chair that I'm sitting in.
Oh, okay, good.
UCI legal.
Good. Okay, that's important. So once you figured out the course, then how did you make some decisions on your equipment then at that point?
Equipment wise, well, I already sort of had the basis in place from a couple of record attempts I did last year. I was using a Factor Hanzo time trial bike, but while I did those attempts last year, certainly the position wasn't all that sustainable. So I'd pretty much spent the entire winter optimizing my position. I think we talked about it on this podcast before about how I used Google Meet to meet with myself on a different computer and get 2 angles and sometimes 3 angles of my position just to give me a sort of 360 view on what that was like there. and a lot of it was based trial and error, and mostly just on feel. Like you can't really or you can't really undersell how important just how you feel on a bike is. And I know maybe that might not be the best way for most people, or for some people, to set up their bikes, but for any experienced riders out there, we can go to bike fitters and that, and I definitely recommend that would be a starting point. But quite often I find that I just adjust the position to what feels better, and that's very much what I did, especially on a time trial bike when you're in such an extreme position. Like the angles and that don't really work the same. I don't think so. The big thing about a time trial position, I think, is just hamstring flexibility, and obviously you're trying to get as aerodynamic as possible also, but start with comfort and then work towards aero afterwards. And one of the things I was most happy about on Sunday was just how comfortable I was in the time trial position, and it sort of just came together over the past month or so, having spent a long time working on it.
What hurt the most?
It was just normal ride a bike for 15 hours pain. There wasn't really any.
Oh, okay.
So everything. Okay, good. All right.
Yeah, everything. Yeah, it's not like I did a time trial record last year, and it was 5.25 hours, and I couldn't pee properly for a week.
Oh.
So there was nothing like that. That's really not good.
Yeah.
So
less than ideal.
Yeah. But yeah, I think the most annoying thing about the position was that I hadn't worn. I decided not to wear like mitts or gloves, and so my wedding ring was just like knocking on the extensions for the entire day and rattling. And at the start, when I didn't know what was rattling, that was very annoying. And then when I found out it was my ring, it was like even more annoying, because the more tired I got, the less I could stop it from happening.
What did you decide on for things like? Your position was nailed down at that point. So what did you do as far as like drivetrain and wheels and tires and that sort of thing?
Tires was a last minute decision. I have Conti's GP 5000 TT tires, which I didn't think would be a great option for a 570 kilometer ride, given how light they are. And in the end up, I put a STR 5000 STR on the rear, 28mm, and I stuck with a TT up front, and it survived the full 570 kilometers without any. And I've already done a few time trials on it, so I was pleasantly surprised how that tire, given how light and it's built for speed, not really durability. So happy with that. Wheels, I had the Princeton Carbon Works Wake. Is it 7580 tri-spoke? I can't remember the exact numerical name, part of that name, and a Black Ink Zero disc at the rear. And then drivetrain wise, I think the thing that I liked most about this bike was the Miche Pistard Air track crank that I had on the bike, which is like a much more aerodynamic looking. Didn't actually test it, but it looks a lot more aerodynamic. 165mm length, but obviously being a track crank, the Q factor is much narrower, 138mm. Obviously, also the chain line is it's narrower also, so that did limit me to running a 56 tooth chainring, but that was kind of what I was going to run anyway, given the amount of climbing on this course. And Pyramid Cycle Designs actually made a 144 BCD chainring, narrow road 1x narrow wide chainring for that track crank, and they stocked like that's a stock product for them. So I thought that was quite neat. And then on the actual chain, I had two chains, one Silka hot melt chain, just if it was going to be a good day, and I also had my usual sort of time trialing and training chain that I wax and clean anyway, but had that stripped down and had it applied with a replacement bottle of Ceramic Speed's UFO Wet. We discussed that previously on the podcast also, and my sort of underwhelming experience previously.
Yeah, ditto.
Since then, Ceramic Speed have assured me that we got basically a faulty batch in that sample that we were trying, and so they replaced that. I had to send back the previous bottle. They replaced it now, and I used that for the first time on Sunday. Perhaps a risky strategy, but yeah, that was what I did anyway. And most of the first 200 kilometers, it was either raining or very, very wet roads. And I got about 270 kilometers into the ride before I had to apply any sort of wet lube to that chain, which to me was a vast improvement over the previous experience with that lube. So I want to try it again in wet conditions before I make a final judgment, but seems like there's definitely something different, given that the last time I used that stuff, it lasted 70 kilometers.
Yeah, and I had the same experience. I'm a little hurt that Ceramic Speed didn't haven't asked me to send my bottle back. They just that's all right.
Well, maybe they don't think you're going to be riding more than 70 kilometers in the wet, Dave.
Yeah, it was a one-off that I actually got caught in the rain, and that I then found out that their wet lube didn't work as claimed. So let's not repeat that.
Well, Ronan, that sounds like quite the ride for sure. Congratulations to you, and it's pretty awesome that you're doing that for such a worthy cause. But yeah, definitely head over to escapecollective.com for the full write-up on Ronan's ride, and
there's no secrets in there. This everything that I knew about this ride was in there, including CDA, everything. No wattage figures. Everything we have is in there.
Yeah, so just go ahead over there if you want to just fully nerd out.
Quick question, final question on this. How many beta fuel gels did you take in the 15 hours?
I restricted the nootropic ones big time. I was having beta fuel, but yeah, I was using Kinetica energy gels instead on Sunday.
All right.
Although I do have a question for SIS, in that it's kids' sports day at school on Friday, and I'm wondering if the nootropics, is there like a lower age limit that you can?
Oh man,
my daughter really wants a medal.
Oh, the lengths parents go. We'll check in with you on that next week.
That is a joke.
Sure it is. All right, well, Dave, for kind of the last thing I want to talk about on the show today, I want to touch on something I noticed from your quite impressive mountain of coverage from the Handmade Bicycle Show Australia. And this is something that you and I have discussed a fair bit. Ronan, I can't remember if you and I have discussed it, but we already know that SRAM's universal derailleur hanger format has gotten quite popular for mountain bikes. And for obvious reasons. I mean, all those brands want at least the ability to run their new transmission stuff. And we're certainly starting to see it now on sort of the latest crop of gravel bikes. Certainly for all the riders that want to run mullet transmissions on those things from SRAM. But we're starting to see it a little bit more on the road too. And I did notice that a couple of the custom bikes that were on display in Australia had that. Did you talk to anyone there about sort of where UDH might be going for drop bar road bikes?
I did, and it was one of the conversations with Darren Baum of Baum Cycles was going to be in a special podcast episode dedicated to all things Handmade Bike Show. And that episode is not happening because turns out I can't read sound levels, and a lot of the audio clips were blown out in the wind and all that. So unfortunately that didn't happen. So it's all in my head instead. And but yeah, Darren did share with me that the UDH he believes makes sense for gravel bikes, and he's already started to use it there. But the next and keep in mind, Darren's normally not one to jump on trends. He'll normally see the trend first and then spend 3 years trying to figure out how to do it better. But yeah, he's reluctant for it with road because he says the width actually isn't ideal. So the dropout width is sort of wider than you really want on a road bike, and what that presents as an issue is heel rub with a short chainstay. So yeah, that's sort of I would say from what I've heard and what I've seen and what actually makes sense is that sort of the limitation here is that that UDH design is quite wide, and when we're talking about bikes with short chainstays, which are specifically road bikes, it remains to be seen as to whether that'll actually be adopted.
How short are we talking here? Like, just thinking that chainstays are sort of growing anyway. What sort of length are you talking?
I mean, most disc brake road bikes are around the 410, 415 these days.
Is that what you mean when you say short? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think anything shorter than that sort of these days is asking for trouble with wider rear ends the way they are. But it's, maybe a 405. But yeah, we're certainly not seeing Pinarello 395 length chainstays anymore on modern road bikes. So, that's something that's interesting to me. And what I've heard rumor wise is that SRAM doesn't intend to do like a road version of UDH, like a narrow version. UDH is universal derailleur hanger, and they truly mean that it is a universal derailleur hanger. They intend it to be the one solution for all. So yeah, I think it's interesting. I think when we do start to see mainstream brands adopt UDH onto road bikes, then that would be a sign that it's happening. But right now, I'm skeptical as to whether we'll see it move past gravel bikes.
Well, one of the bikes that I'm testing right now is that new Esprit from Rida. And granted, that's not like a pure road racing bike. They kind of bill it more as an all-road bike. But that bike actually does have UDH on the back of it. And it's something that you can visually get away with a little bit more on a carbon bike, I think. You've got a little bit more freedom to kind of like, manipulate things and kind of shape tubes and that sort of thing. I can definitely see how heel rub could be an issue on a metal bike with UDH. But I have definitely heard from a handful of product managers that, as you said, Dave, SRAM does intend for UDH to be truly to be truly universal. There's not going to be a road variant. SRAM clearly is interested in getting more road brands to use UDH, however. And on the road, of course, the motivation there would not be to be able to run their new transmission stuff, because you're not going to be seeing mullet transmission stuff on a road bike. However, just the fact that they are gently nudging brands to consider using UDH on their road bikes, that suggests to me that if they are not already testing it, if they're not already developing, they certainly are looking at that style of attachment for a new generation of road rear derailleur.
Yeah, and the mountain bike world, it happened very quickly. Like we saw, it was like 3 years of UDH frames being a thing, and SRAM pitching it as kind of like them being the savior to there being a different derailleur with every bike. It's like, we've done this nice thing. We've created this $15 derailleur hanger that you can buy anywhere, and it'll fit your new mountain bike. And then within 3 years, it's like, and by the way, here's this Trojan horse. Yeah, exactly. Here's this T-type derailleur that you didn't see coming, and your bike works with it. So yeah, we're certainly seeing that in the gravel space. Basically every new gravel bike I've seen released in the last few months seems to have UDH fitted, and the bikes we've seen upcoming from Unbound have UDH, and a lot of bikes at the Handmade show had UDH in the gravel space. That's happening. But in the road, I think as soon as we start to see some of the more prominent road brands adopt this, then you know what to expect.
I feel like it's just going to take one. It's just going to take one of the big brands to jump on it, and then it's all in.
Yeah. So, and given the partnerships, I would say probably someone like Cervelo or Trek, given the World Tour partnerships there, I'd say they're probably the first brands if it were to happen. But yeah, I think the tech makes sense. I think that T-type derailleur does make sense on the road. It's got a narrower profile. It sits more in line with the back end of the bike. And honestly, if you do crash on it, you drive side down, the derailleur itself is fine. And it would protect the frame. I think we'd see fewer bike changes as a result of it in a racing situation, if and when it does happen. But anyway.
Well, I think we can agree that whatever the timeline might end up being, I feel like it's a foregone conclusion at this point that UDH is coming for the road. It's just a matter of when.
Okay. Interesting.
I think anyway. I mean, if you disagree, certainly now is the time to chime in.
No, I mean I've said my piece, which is just I'm still a little bit skeptical just based on the general width of it. But yeah, as you say, James, I'm sure manufacturers will figure out how to cleanly integrate that.
I didn't say I wasn't skeptical. Okay. I just said that I'm pretty confident that it's coming.
Yeah. So. Yeah. No, that's fair. That's fair. I do agree with that. So
my experience is if we're having this conversation, it's coming.
Are you saying everything that gets discussed on this podcast ends up happening?
No, I'm saying everything that cyclists disagree over should or shouldn't happen eventually does happen.
Oh, okay. All right.
And then we just disagree over whether we need it or not.
All right. Oh, well, we should probably have an argument about whether I need a CNC machine. So I'd like to conjure that.
Oh man! All right, well, Dave, we can save that for another episode, maybe a little bit closer to your birthday.
Good.
Birthday. We'll put that on the calendar. All right, well, let's go ahead and wrap up this episode because we, of course, are running a little bit long because there's never any shortage of tech things to talk about. So we'll reserve our PSA stuff for next week, perhaps. Actually, speaking of next week, Ronan and I will be at the Eurobike trade show in Frankfurt, Germany. So we will likely have an on-site episode coming from the Eurobike trade show. So for regular listeners, just bear in mind that show may be a day late. We'll see how that goes because the show doesn't really open until Wednesday. And normally we record on Tuesdays, and we're not going to bother recording a Eurobike special on Tuesday if we hadn't actually seen anything at the show yet. So anyway, stay tuned for a special episode, maybe even more than one episode. We'll see next week. So keep your ears open for that one. Anyway, thanks as always for listening to Geek Warning. Again, we don't run any ads, so we do rely on your memberships to keep this whole thing running. So if you have not already signed up for the Escape Collective, please head over to the site and do so. If you have, thank you very much for your support. We really do appreciate it. Another thing that is very helpful for us is if you have not yet left us a rating and review on iTunes, please do so. 5 stars only, please. 5, nothing but 5s. Because again, that does help more people find the show, which does help us out as far as our visibility on the platform. So please go ahead and do that as well. So anyway, with that all said, we will see you next week.
Cheers.